Brother EJ, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for reaching out, and hello to the listeners, of course.
Yeah, I feel like doing this podcast and our listeners are connected with you now as well, brother. And we're with a guru because you do so much work in the space of storytelling, and in a way, podcasting is like storytelling as well. We try to get a story as well as principles and tips and ways for people to understand negotiations better through the art of storytelling. But you're a guru when it comes to storytelling. I was wondering if you can share with us some of the things you've learned in your journey. How can we use concepts from storytelling to help us in our negotiations to influence better?
Yeah, I think, Matthew, one of the first things I've learned, and this was years ago before I started in this industry, is this idea of communication and talking and listening. And it's really the bloke who was telling me about this. He drew the diagram. You know, the stick person says, "Here's the stick person," sends a message to the other stick person, and if they don't respond, then you're not communicating. So it's always in the response is when the communication starts. And I find that sometimes we talk so much to people and don't allow for the response. So that's become, I feel that's become a real skill of mine as a storyteller, is to listen to the response. And when you're listening to the response, you're not just listening to what is said, you're taking in how it's said, who's saying it, what's behind that response. So as a storyteller, especially when you like video content or any type of content, you're sitting there, sometimes you're ready to go for the next question and you miss what the response is. So, and I think that takes a lot of courage, because especially when you're producing content, you got to get the content. Sometimes you get a bit impatient to meet those requirements. But if you allow yourself just to be in that space and allow for that response and to be able to digest that response and take that response in, I feel that you'll find your capacity as a storyteller increases dramatically.
That's awesome. And I'm intrigued as well, brother, because when you talk about storytelling, for example, in film work, and when you're recording something behind the camera lens that you know is going to be aired and shared at some later stage, and you might not even be there when most people are watching what you've created or listening to what you've created, experiencing what you've created, how can you listen in that sort of situation?
That's the thing, Bruss. That's where it is. So, because I did a lot of work with Bush TV, producing this series called The Murray Minute. I remember the first time I went on Community up in North Queensland. We were there to produce some stories, and I went over and sat with these aunties at this event. That was difficult, because we went from that community. I was sort of new to this work. And I sat with one of them aunties, and then one old auntie leaned over to me and said, "That took a bit of courage, eh?" And then that was a big game changer for me. And I realised that, our culture is such a beautiful, generous culture, which I've known all my life. And now I realise that's across our whole country, where our elders are so generous. But what else it taught me is that your best story or your best talent isn't normally the most obvious. So you come from when you're producing content, you have a pretty strict form. When you're producing content for broadcast, there's a pretty strict format. What is the story Here are the questions, go get it. You know, and the questions are designed to get the content to produce the story that you need. Especially as a journalist, video journalist, it was always about the story. Get the story, bring it back, file it, and it really doesn't allow for that. You know, that listening I was talking about. So when I stepped out of those spaces and went into my own approach to storytelling, it just allowed me to, you know, just to sit in that space and listen.
I can really understand that if you're going out there as a journalist, for example, and you've got a bag of questions, by asking those questions, you can shape the direction of the story.
That's right.
And this applies to negotiations as well, because if we're negotiating with a family member, negotiating with community, even the discussions that you mentioned briefly, adding community with aunties, like there's subtle forms of negotiations that are probably taking place and they're being shaped by the questions that you're asking. But when you go the more attuned approach that you're speaking of, which is through the listening, do you lose control of the story that's being told if you're listening more?
That's it, Russ. That's what it's all about. Because as a storyteller, whose story are you telling? And then, you know, are you telling your own story? Or are you telling the story of the person or the community that has engaged you or that you're working with to tell a story? I do a lot of time with elders, you know, doing storytelling for elders for the State Library as records, as archives, and it's just such a beautiful approach because we just allow the elders to share, and you know, and there's no format, you know, and it may not be best for television or YouTube or streaming services, but it's still beautiful stories, and I find myself, you know, just attracted to those spaces, those stories.
Yeah, and this is where we need to stay open through the process to experience and appreciate what's presenting itself. Because like you say, the YouTube or the 1 minute story on Instagram or something like this is very bang, bang, punchy, and you get that hit of, oh yeah, I've learned something very quickly. But in that bag of questions approach, rather than the open listening approach, how much are you actually missing out on?
That's right. And
now I'm scared to ask you a question, brother. Now I want to sit here and just listen to for the rest of the podcast.
Oh no, it has to come. It has to come from a place of intrigue. You know, a place of passion, a place of familiarity. Because when these old people talk, they talk of life experience that you're experiencing. So there's always gems. There's always gems in these stories. I remember one old fella talking about The Simpsons, and he couldn't understand why The Simpsons were so popular to kids. Then he told me, he reckons, see them kids, you know, while they watch The Simpsons? He said, what's the first thing you see when you're watching The Simpsons? They're all together on the lounge. Yep, that's how it starts. How does it finish? They're always together. And despite the dysfunction and the stupid things that happen in those characters' lives, they're always together from start to end. And he said that's what young people want.
That connection.
Yeah.
That connection, that's what we all want, isn't it?
That's what we all want. And I that was very seminal for me. And I said, wow. That little bit of wisdom changed my attitude to The Simpsons for sure, you know. But it's just an example of the wisdom that comes out in these conversations or in these interviews. And when
Yeah,
we talk
and you
about,
think about The Simpsons as well, right? It was family sitting down because the whole show appealed to all generations.
yes,
So people of all generations would come down, watch the set time box before everything was on YouTube and online, everything like this. Everybody would sit down at a scheduled time, come together, connect, and watch something that everybody can relate to.
well, a lot of people were against it because of the behaviour. There was some really radical behaviour in that series. Bart was probably a really dysfunctional. Well, that family was a whole dysfunctional family, but in reality, we're all dysfunctional. Have a level of dysfunction. Our families have a level of dysfunction, and all these kids wanted to engage in was this show that said, "Yeah, we're dysfunctional, but we're still together."
Yeah, so when
Well,
we come together in our negotiations and we can embrace and accept other people's dysfunctions through this.
oh, well, with negotiations, it's really interesting. When I started out filmmaking, especially the Murray Minutes, I wanted mainstream Australia to see what I saw. I wanted them to see the the resilience, the generosity, the gentleness of our culture. I wanted mainstream Australia to see the wisdom, and the amazing work that's been happening in these communities over the years. I wanted mainstream Australia to see that. And then over the
Yeah, and that,
years, I'm at this place where I don't need Australia to see what I see. What I really like is I want the rest of Aboriginal Australia to see who we are and what we can do and how resilient we are for our own strength.
so why do you say you want Aboriginal Australia to see this and not the whole of Australia?
So I'm not making it for the whole of Australia. I'm making it. I'm making these stories for myself and for Aboriginal Australia, and just so that you know, I used to laugh about this, but black fellas love seeing black fellas on TV. They just love it.
Because you can relate, you can connect,
Yeah, yeah, and we
right?
don't cause we don't see it often. We don't see it often enough. So when it happens, it's like, yeah, there. And when it comes to negotiation, it's all for me. It's always around relationship. You know, and we have as a business sector, and it goes. Our business sector reflects our community. We're so generous. We're so giving. I've worked with a lot of Aboriginal businesses, especially small businesses, through my Buying Black platform. And man, they're just so beautiful. Like support each other. And most of these businesses are aunties, who have a passion and decided to maybe try to make some extra cash out of that passion. We've got single mums, found a skill that they really enjoy, want to supplement, their wage, or they supplement the money that they're already getting, and they're not out to make big bucks, but they support each other. They they're so innovative and so hardworking. So when it comes to negotiations from my perspective, it always comes down to relationship and what are we negotiating here?
And you mentioned you're buying black. We might have some listeners thinking, yeah, that sounds interesting. What is buying black, brother? Can you explain it for
So
everyone?
so it started out as an idea for a TV series. So I've put this idea around the the legacy of Aboriginal business. So, and I based the idea on grand designs. So, grand designs, they go with a homeowner from the ground up, they build a house, and they follow that build maybe 3 years, maybe 10 years. I saw one house took 10 years to build. Oh, God. But they follow that whole process. And my idea is to follow Aboriginal businesses over, 5 years, 7 years, a real legacy piece, and explore the challenges and the triumphs. And it's like I just couldn't get it up. I just couldn't get it across the line. But I fell in love with this idea I've kept it going. It's been running for like 7-8 years now, and I just can't walk away from it. So I employ a part-time social media person who does our posts for us, and we've got a platform with a directory, and we just do it because we love Aboriginal business, because we
And there's
see
plenty to love when you look at Aboriginal businesses.
That's it, brother. You've seen them.
What are some of the things that you love when you see Aboriginal business?
The generosity and the intent. A lot of these fellas didn't start the business because they wanted to make money. A lot of these businesses started the business because it was a cultural pursuit, whether it was art, bush foods, cultural tours. They started it because it was a pursuit. Even your tradies, they saw an opportunity to create like safe places for young people to come and work in their trade, and that's why that's why they started a business. So you have these. It's really the cultural integrity in Aboriginal business you won't get anywhere else. And you talk about negotiation. Aboriginal businesses talk this language. We're more interested in legacy and relationships. We're not, and it mightn't be good business, but we're not necessarily invested in the deal. Maybe we should be, I don't know. But we're just more interested.
I think what you're also saying, brother, is a deeper meaning, right? And some of these things you've spoken about generosity, legacy, relationships. This is a deeper purpose, community, making sure that we can go towards closing the gap. We see the power of business and want to make an impact into future generations because of past generations and opportunities that have been given. There's a great deeper purpose for Aboriginal businesses. And then when you look at non-Aboriginal businesses, often there isn't that inherent purpose at the very beginning. So they have it the other way around. Mm. And I feel like when we speak about this sort of stuff, this is part of the wisdom that comes with Aboriginal business too, right, brother? Because I think that often there's disadvantage associated with Aboriginal business. But what about looking at the strength that you're speaking of and understanding how beautiful it is and how lucky it is to be part of a business that is driven by a deeper purpose? That you get up and you're working with mob and you're connecting and yarning and you're working with people that you love. And that keeps you going. That's the fuel in the belly.
That's him, brother. But we're forced in this other paradigm around objectives, KPIs, drawdowns, deliver. And sometimes when we get caught up in that space, we start to lose that purpose. So it's a real interesting space for us because, business has to have these business outcomes to survive. But we have these other, these other cultural requirements that we need to sustain ourselves. And sometimes we're challenged by that.
I love money, brother. I say that to get this jolt, right?
Yeah.
The reason why I say this is because often Aboriginal people can also forget the money piece. They can forget that if you make financial improvement through business, you can go deeper into creating legacy. You can help and support relationships. You can help and support community through the generosity of what money and financial success through business and the pathways that that finance can bring into allowing better outcomes for community. If you look at, for example, education, well, that costs money. You look at health, well, that costs money. If we can do all things right in business and as well through everything lining up, be financially successful through that business and also then help communities, help families as a result, I think that's a beautiful way of doing it. But it definitely is about understanding the deeper purpose first and foremost. Sometimes I like saying I love money, brother, because it gets a jolt. A lot of black fellas are like, oh, what? You know, you're greedy, whatever. And I think sometimes, to be honest, that aversion to appreciating money can create problems for Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal businesses. And so I think that what we need to be able to do is keep the purpose first and foremost and look for ways to constructively, ethically, morally, in all the good ways that is going to benefit mob, also create finance through business success. And I think that's a big part to what self-determination needs to be about as well.
So, brothers, I've been in business for nearly 30 years, and I don't love money, but I've come to learn to respect money and what it brings. And it's been a tough lesson, but I've finally arrived to that point. So it's about, when you talk about your value, it's about being serious about what is your worth and what are you prepared to sort of sacrifice for your livelihood, and then you get down to price points, about. So that's been a big part of my learning. I'm still learning, so so some mob will find it hard to go, well, this is my value, this is what I'm putting on this quote. You take it or leave it, and there's multiple reasons why people might undervalue themselves and their work. Maybe it's because if they feel they price themselves too high, they're out of the market, or they don't want to appear to be unattainable by community, because they still want to work with community. So it's like, but what are you willing to sacrifice for your livelihood? And once you come to terms with that and realise, yep, you have a value, and that's where your price point is, and that's what you need to go with. And if you don't get the job, then something else will come along. Yeah.
Yeah, and understanding what you can do by setting the price point and appreciating the value that you bring, what you can do through good financial business success to help positively impact community.
That's right.
And it's a really interesting concept to think about when we say whether we love money, we don't like money, however we feel about money. But what is this thing called money? And personally, I believe that it's nothing more than a currency. I believe it's nothing more than an energy. It's a measurement of energy. And that's why we call money in different currencies in different nations around the world. We have, the euro dollar, the US dollar, Australian dollar, Thai baht. There's like different currency for different measurements of this energy, the financial energy, and each nation has this. And when we measure things like electricity or we measure water, we measure these in currents as well as another form of energy. And so I think that if we can deliver value and do good for community, then the currency should be appropriate, because that way we can serve. And also another big part of this, I see a lot of amongst other Aboriginal people a lot, is like what you were saying, making sure that what you're doing is properly valued, properly appreciated, and making sure, there's been a problem for many years of artists out in remote communities creating beautiful pieces of artwork, not really being financially rewarded, doing it tough, and then subbing institution, making mega bucks off their art piece, and making sure that doesn't happen through truly appreciating the value that culture represents and the knowledge that cultural keepers have when creating beautiful artwork, as an example.
See, bros, this is what I love about yarning and storytelling. Um, you've shed a light on my own understanding of where I am and what I'm doing, because I always felt money was time. So I wanted to make money so I could buy my own time. But now you're talking about reinvesting back in the community, and that's maybe that's where my next my purpose comes from here on is working to ensure my community is supported as well.
Yeah, and I feel like it isn't time because time is fixed. We all have 24 hours in a day, but I feel like money is a measurement of vibration. And when people are getting ripped off in community, it's because there is a misalignment between the amazing vibration that they're offering, for example, in amazing artwork, and the measurement of the number that's matching that not actually being aligned with the value of what's being represented. And that's what's wrong. We have to have proper appreciation, proper value, proper measurement, integrity of the frequency and offering and value that's being delivered by Aboriginal businesses.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. It's a great conversation, brother, I tell you, for sure.
That's one of the reasons why I like popping out there saying I love money, because if people are like, what? They get the back up straight away. But then when you dig deeper into it and you yarn into it, I think that, there can be some insight in shifting some people's minds. And I think this is where we need to start thinking and growing to get better results through Aboriginal businesses and Aboriginal communities. And I want to see a day where I would love to see the day, as many people would, I'm sure, where we have Aboriginal community organisations who are financially resourced in the self-determined way. I'd love to see that one day if that ever was to happen. But this creates some real challenges, brother, in terms of how do we keep this place of integrity and cultural responsibility? How can they stay together?
Brother, I really think you've touched on something here, that the idea of vibration and power, energy. It resonates for me because it's true. When a community is invested in, the vibration does change. When you have Aboriginal businesses in a community, that vibration changes. I've seen it.
Yeah, and this is where we need to see more authentic Aboriginal businesses. But it's also what you were saying before when you speak about Aboriginal business and relationships being one of the beautiful parts of Aboriginal business, because we can all vibrate together. And you go to stuff like, the Supply Nation Connect, where there are still a lot of authentic Aboriginal businesses, and we can get together and yarn and connect. And it's just such a fun time to be able to support each other, go on this journey. And they're relationships that can last forever, that you can meet through this path too.
Us bros, relationships is like an economy to us. We understand relationships better than anyone, and not only understand them but appreciate them as well. Like, when's the last time we yarn, bros? Like, it's been years, and look, we're just like, it hasn't been. Like, we just had coffee yesterday. I think we're experts when it comes to relationships. We're professors.
Why is that? Why do Aboriginal people connect with each other so well?
This is my theory, brother. This is my theory. I've sort of looked at my experience and the relatives that I grew up, and when I was a child, I used to hear people come to the house and they'd sit up late at night having cups of tea, but when you wake up in the morning, they'd be gone. And this would happen regular. And then mum say, oh, yeah, your Uncle Hector just come through here, or, your auntie come through last night. And then I realised that these mobs that were travelling needed those relatives to sustain their journey. And so it almost feels like the more relatives you got, the bigger the economy you have. and some mob out there may listen and think, no, my relatives are hard work. But I know that it used to be our families just supported us no matter what, whether we were travelling, whether we were broke, whether we needed somewhere to stay. It was the richness of those networks, those relatives, that sustained us. And I think that's why we are so good at it, and that skill remains today. And I hope we never lose that.
I was reading something really sad recently that most men, by the time they reach late 30s to 40s, probably only have 2 or 3 friends. That's pretty sad. And you're speaking here about this beautiful part of relationships and connections and these insights as an Aboriginal fella growing up and valuing relationships. If we've got someone that's listening to us now and they're being honest and saying, you know what, yeah, I'm probably in that 2 or 3 friend group, what are some of these principles of relationships that you could share with them to help them understand about developing more friendships?
Well, I tell people I've got no mates. I've got a lot of family. So I've got brothers, brother-in-laws, cousins, nephews, uncles. And so it's really tight-knit, and we're so well connected. And it's just lucky. It's just luck, I suppose, that it's happened that way. But I always feel that it's your closest circle that you have the potential to create the strongest relationships with. So I've been really lucky where I have a support circle of family that I can rely on, and they can rely on me as well. So yeah, I don't have many mates, but geez, I've got a lot of brothers and cousins, uncles, and yeah, even in that extended, blackfellas extended family, I've got cousins everywhere, and I got cousins I can call on, for a feed or for a catch up, or even for a place to stay. I'm very lucky. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think especially for men, especially going through their 30s and 40s, it's, we always feel that it's what we do that brings rewards, and you'll get to a time where you cannot do what you used to do, and it comes down to who you are. And I think once you sort of start to see that it's not necessarily what I do for people, but who I am to people, I think you'll start realizing that who your family is, and who your friends are. Yeah.
That's awesome, brother. You've shared a little bit of the insights about negotiating in these sorts of creative pieces. But what else is there, brother, when you reflect back on your experiences through productions on these platforms, SBS, NITV, Bush TV and other platforms as well? What are some of the things that really stand out in your mind in terms of, yeah, wow, this is a great principle of negotiation that took place here?
I think for me is your level of investment weighing up against your willingness to negotiate. Because, some people say the best form of negotiation is not to say anything at all, and it speaks the loudest. So what I mean by the level of your investment, so especially for broadcast, you have a number of investors, You all have responsibility to get that story told. And I'm just one person, as like, just a documentary going to broadcast. I'm the writer director. You have a producer. You have an EP. You have a funding body. You got the broadcaster, and you got the person telling the story, or the family of the person you're telling the story for. So there's all these stakeholders. So your level of investment is equal to everyone else's. So you have to sometimes understand that, and sometimes acquiesce to that stakeholder group, because you know that it's not just your story, and there's a lot at stake to getting told. When you've invested, oh sorry, yeah, Russ, yeah.
I'm just wondering, no, you know what, brother? I'm going to take a leaf out of your book. I'm going to listen, brother. I'm not going to ask this question yet. I'm
Yeah.
going to keep listening.
So, yeah, for me, it's about to negotiate is weighing up against how much you've invested in a project where I'm the lead. I've put the most stake in than anyone else. I negotiate pretty strongly in my favour because it's my project. Anyone else comes into that space, I'm very cautious of how much control they have and how much influence they can have on the project. So in film and television, it's there's a lot of legalities around it to make sure that you're in a strong position to negotiate. And I think the main principle is understanding your position. Where do you stand in that space? If you're standing strong and have a strong base, then you can negotiate in favour to yourself. But if you're only if you're not don't have a strong foundation and there's multiple stakeholders, then you may not be able to get everything that you want. Maybe you just get what you need, and then you just gotta take that and get the project done, get it made, get it delivered.
How do you balance this? How do you balance it if you aren't the major investor, but authenticity is really important to you? In, for example, making sure that a cultural story is authentically told.
Yeah, for me, it's always from the story, the storyteller, the source, whatever they want, and then being, the best thing is just to be honest, saying this is what we're here to do. These are our limitations. Are you still interested in being involved? Be upfront, be honest. Then there's no surprises and no one's disappointed.
Yeah, these principles of knowing your limitations and really being honest in that process, and also making sure that before you put your hand up to do something, that the people that you're going to be working with have a common set of values.
Oh,
so you can be set up to succeed that way.
No, sometimes you don't get that.
That'd be pretty challenging.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you got to have, I like to call them the adult conversations. You got to have the adult conversations, and it's not about personalities or characteristics. It's about the story and what's the best way to get the story made for the right reasons. And I've always said, if a creative project, if there's no disagreements, then no one's invested.
Because often disagreement in itself can be a cornerstone to success. When you've got different people coming together, bringing different opinions, different views, so long as the differences of opinion are respectfully listened to, this goes back to your point about listening, brother, but respectively listened to, and you're all there separating the people from the problem, geared towards the best piece that tells the authentic story in the end, right?
Yes, that meets the requirements of all the stakeholders. So you're really navigating a difficult sort of journey, but these are the things you sort of got to be cautious of. And when, like you say, when you step into that space, are you ready to do that?
If there was one thing, just one thing, that you wanted people that have listened to this episode of Rolling Through Negotiations to get out of what you've shared so that they can negotiate better, what would that one thing be?
Listen, brother.
Yeah, awesome.
And not only listen to what's being said to you, but listening to how you're reacting to that. Because if something's making you uncomfortable, then maybe that's a reflection of where you are at in these negotiations as well. If something's touching a nerve in the negotiation, then it might be a time to check yourself around. Why does that make me feel uncomfortable? Why does that irk me so much? And maybe there's something in your requirements in that negotiation that don't meet your values as well.
Awesome. I think that piece of listening is great. You definitely have left us with something deep when you speak of listening, and I felt these words from you resonate at a level that I haven't really experienced when discussing listening with people before. So that's amazing. It's powerful stuff.
Like that, like when you said you love money, that hit a nerve for me. So I sat with that, and then I understood what you were saying.
Yeah.
You weren't saying you love money. You were saying what money can bring, this vibration, this energy.
And let's understand what it is, right? Like I've played a game before when I've gone to the shop and I sort of, might be going to the grocery store and asking the cash register clerk, how did I pay for that? With money? Well, how? I just held my phone up to this electronic device. Like there's no physical object of money, right? There was a vibration that went through a frequency that went through and paid for something. And we can try and symbolize this through, metal coins and plastic pieces of something that we can call notes that most of us don't even possess anymore, right? We can go into the bank and look at numbers on the screen, but actually what is money? And this is where I believe money is a frequency, it's a vibration, it's an energy source. And I feel like if we understand this, I believe this is a way in which Aboriginal people can financially grow, because when it comes to energy, water, fire, energy that's on country, which money's on country as well, I believe, because we're on country and we're part of the energy and frequency in which money vibrates through. If we can understand that it's actually just an energy, well, maybe then it's about mastering the energy like we have so many other energies and the frequency of which it is.
Well, brother, in less than an hour, you've convinced me.
Awesome, brother.
Yeah, it's going to change my whole approach.
Awesome, brother. Because I honestly believe this is where self-determination can come into it as well.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And like, you know what? Because I talk about what gets you out of bed. I always say stress. Because stress gets me out of bed. It gets me onto the computer or gets me in the car to go to work. But you're so true. Money can get you out of bed because of the energy that it brings.
The frequency of service, right? The frequency of service. You've got something to create, to produce.
Yes.
You need to vibrate, to resonate on a particular level to allow your creative output to be achieved. And through that vibration, you're delivering fantastic value that then is recorded in the currency that we call money. But it's the energy of that vibration, the creative energy that then gets appreciated and recorded just in a numerical form that might appear on your online banking or wherever it is. But I believe that really what money is, it's a frequency, it's a vibration, it's an energy.
I love that. Like the most honourable pursuit is in the service of others. and to be able to financially support the community to achieve what they want to achieve, so they can support and help others. Yeah, brother, you want to hear something? You onto something, that's for sure. Keep it going, my brother.
Awesome,
Spread
brother.
the word. Spread the word.
Yeah,
Let's do a t-shirt.
yeah, awesome, brother. Yeah, I think that it's been an amazing yarn, and I appreciate the insights you've shared. I'm going to reflect on this piece about listening that you shared as well.
Brother, this conversation is going to stay with me for a while too. Really, thank you for the opportunity and sharing that wisdom, like you're doing. That's in the service of others, and you're bringing this message about energy, vibrancy. Man, it's a beautiful message.
Awesome, brother.
Mm.
Is there any last thing you'd like to say before we wrap this one up?
I'm good, brother.
Awesome. Legend.
Oh, man.
Legend, brother. You're deadly. What you do is deadly. I love your personality. I love your energy. I love your creative spirit, your storytelling. And you do. What about if people want to reach out to you? They want to get some production work done. How can they reach you?
Just Google EJ Garrett, brother.
Awesome. We'll have your
EJ Garrett.au.
EJ Garrett.au, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and if you can link buying black, brother, we try to sell some merch, and have a subscription for some of the stories that I've produced just to support our work, so I can have a wage there for my nephew to keep the social media running.
Deadly.
Yeah, and we're out in a small community, so we would appreciate any support that anyone can give us. That's for sure.
All right. So check out in the show notes, guys. The link will be there to EJ Garrett, and also the link will be there to Buying Black. Love your work, brother. Thanks for being part of Rolling Through Negotiations podcast. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I think it's been a really fantastic yarn with EJ, and brand new episodes of Rolling Through Negotiations podcast come out each and every single Thursday. Remember, share, subscribe, like the podcast so it can keep on bringing you more great episodes just like this one. Us.